This is kind of an interesting topic to try and tackle. I wanted to do a little bit more than a hello world because considering the talent and expertise in this room, I'm sure that we could all do a hello world in Express or a Node application. But sometimes it's good to go back to the basics too. But as I was putting this together, I started thinking more about REST and what REST is. REST is kind of a funny word. I say it's like agile in our society, in our industry. Everyone says they're agile, but everyone does it differently. And REST is the same way. You go talk to someone about an API they built, and they'll tell you it's RESTful. What does that mean? What has anyone ever written a RESTful API or worked with REST before?
Fake REST, sure. I'll admit it, it's fake REST. It's not real REST. And I'm
going to go back to this agile analogy a couple times. Everyone says they're agile, but all that really means too is we do stand up. Or we have a meeting every week that talks about what we're going to do. If you do that, you do agile, but like they both have textbook definitions. Doesn't mean we use them, but they both have textbook definitions. You can go to Scrum Alliance or scrum.org and find out what Scrum is. And REST was defined back in 2000 in a PhD dissertation by Roy Fielding. And this guy I didn't know anything about this guy, but I did some digging. He's actually quite the bright guy. He was pretty involved with the HTTP 1.1 standard and is the primary contributor to the Apache web server. So the guy knows HTTP. He's pretty smart. I was getting ready to disagree with a few of his things until I read some of what he's done, and well, maybe I'm not as smart as I like to think I am. It happens a lot. But REST is really, and this is a vague definition, so of course it's perfect, it's a set of self-imposed constraints on how we write web software. Okay, so what are some of those constraints? Can we name off a couple? There's 6 big ones, 5 big ones. 5 or 6, I can't count. I'm looking at the next slide, I'm cheating. What does a RESTful web service look like?
Resource-driven.
Resource-driven? That's, yes, we'll call that one of them. Oh, that's the big one, it's the ugly one, and most of us quit before we even get there, but I'm going to get there too. Okay. So, the first one, and it's probably the biggest one, the most important, is client-server architecture, separation of concerns. Don't do stuff on the client that you probably should do on the server, and don't do stuff on the server that should be handled on the client. Anything, and that leads us into stateless. Anything that you need to keep track of in between requests should live on the client. The server, every request should be able to have all the information the server needs to know to process without needing anything else. It shouldn't have to go look up any session information. It shouldn't have to, or it could go look up a session ID and go pull that out from somewhere else, but it's not keeping track of who did this or what. Every request should be able to be handled in a vacuum. I think a lot of us cheat on this third one too. I know I do. Caching. Every request needs to have an explicit or implicit, you can cache this or don't cache this. If it's cacheable, then the client can decide if he wants to cache the answer or not. A lot of libraries do that already, so I've never explicitly said it. Uniform interface, and that's the resource identifier that was brought up earlier. Be predictable, and we're going to talk a bit more about this earlier, but there's this umbrella application about what REST is, and it works on HTTP, so this applies to the HTTP interface, but it can also apply to your application. Be predictable, be consistent, don't change ideas in an application, be consistent, have a little bit of thought beforehand, and then a layered system. It should be written in such a way, doesn't matter if I'm behind a load balancer, 3 proxies, and a VPN, or if I'm connecting directly to the web server. I should be able to write this stateless enough that if there's 10 different servers, that any one of them can handle the request just as fine as any of the others. You got things like sticky sessions or round robin. If you're worried about that, you probably have some architecture designs you need to go back and address. The Rust maturity model, we talked about this. There's 4 levels because we start counting at 0, and I always think there's 3 because the last level is level 3. But I get to level 2 here, and I usually stop. So if who's ever done anything with SOAP? Was it fun? I mean, the thing's so easy that I had to put simple right in the name, Simple Object Access Protocol, which was your first hint that it's not easy. That would be level 0. You're hitting one URL for everything, and the request has everything. I need to go create this account. I need to delete this guy. We need to transfer money from A to B. Everything in that SOAP request is contained there. I'm hitting one URL and generally only one method, a post. A SOAP envelope was going to have everything I need in it to process this request. Level 1, and a lot of my first APIs probably, I'm not going to say probably, definitely were level 1. Now we're starting to differentiate between resources on a URL. Xmen/create. Go make me a new Xmen. Xmen-list. Let's go look at all the Xmen I have. So we're kind of putting actions there, or we might be calling different methods on it, but we're still not quite using HTTP. We're using it as a means to communicate, but we're not taking full advantage of what it has to offer. And I said 1, maybe 2 methods. I was smart enough to know that a get shouldn't be changing anything, and a post is when I want to send data or do something if I wanted a body. But level 2, we separate post out into puts, and if you're real brave, deletes. Don't delete anything, just hide it. But you're taking full advantage of HTTP, many URIs and many methods. So if you're following the general set practices, again, there's nothing in here to enforce this. It's just you. But generally, if you're going to call a get on a resource, you're going to return a list of all of them. You can put some a query string in there and say, hey, I want all X-Men named Wolverine. And if you read Marvel, there's about 5 of them right now. Or you can say, go get X-Men with ID number 1. If I do that same URL, but with a put, I'm saying edit this guy. And post will create the X-Man. There is some, I've read contradicting literature in what we should do on a put if it doesn't exist. Some people will say create it. Others will say reject it and throw an error. I tend to follow that. If I want to create a new resource that doesn't exist on the server, I want to explicitly do that. If I do a put, it's like me calling Verizon and saying, hey, I need to change the address on my account. Well, you don't have an account with us. So they're not going to create an account for me just to change my address. Well, sign up and then we'll create the account for you. So just be explicit. And I'm going to admit, I stop here. But if I stop here, by the definition of rest, I'm not restful. Lots of libraries get you here for free. This is a good consumable API. But here is where we turn it up to 11. We go hypermedia. So what does this give me that the step 2 didn't? Links. Okay, go give me all the X-Men, and here's the links to the ones you're interested in. Why is that nice? Because if I come here and I have this predictable pattern, what if we needed to change X-Men to, let's say I want to put a hyphen in there. Something small. I'm not necessarily changing much, just a hyphen. But now I got to go update every application that's using this. But if I can just simply return a link, hey, this guy is here, nobody has to know I changed it. They can just follow it. The server is also kind of helping with the task of, I'm going to say, I said not to keep track of state, but what he tells the client the following actions that are available. And the example, the good example, and I wish I put this in here now, is a bank. If I go get my account at the bank, he may say, all right, here's your account, and if you want to transfer money, click this link. If you want to get more account information here, if you want to deposit money, go here, or withdraw money, go here. And he'll give me a list of all the possible actions. Well, tomorrow is the last day before payday, and I'm overdrawn. So rather than program all these rules into the client, hey, if he's overdrawn, don't let him take out money. We put that in the server, and the server tomorrow just says, all this guy can do is deposit money. So I can keep my client more dumb about what's going on and keep all that business logic on the server. The reason I think a lot of developers, including myself, stop here is there is no set definition of what this looks like. There is no way, or your URLs are going to look like this. It's going to be in this format. Libraries will help you with this, but they don't give it to you free like they do the previous steps. And if you're working on something internal and you want your client to be tightly coupled to your server, you know this is the only client that's going to be using it, maybe it's not so bad. At the end of the day, you need something that works, not something that is academically pure and still in development. I'm not saying stop, or I'm not saying don't go here. Analyze your needs and go forward. Are there any questions up here, or have I made anybody mad by saying don't be pure to be pure? I know I've probably ticked off at least 2 people here. Okay. So, what we all promised. Express. Who here has worked with Express? Be honest. Who here hasn't? Good, okay. I'm really only talking to this guy. So I'm a Java guy that has primarily, or pretending to do some web stuff. And when I first heard about what Node was, about 2 years ago, my first thought was, why would anyone want to run JavaScript not in the browser? And now that I know about it and I played with it a little bit, I still think that. But Node has done a lot of great things for JavaScript. Webpack has probably been one of the biggest, best things out there, the Webpack dev server. That's okay, lots of things. None of them are coming to mind. I had a whole bunch in my head earlier, I promise. But, so Express, would I be too far off base to say it's probably the most popular web framework in Node? From what I've read, I don't think I'm too far off. I couldn't find anything that said this is number 1, but I couldn't tell you what would be ahead of it. Maybe Meteor. Meteor had more stars on GitHub, but that doesn't translate into usage. It just means it had more voters. But this is a minimalistic web framework. I kind of thought of it as Debian, if you wanted a Linux parallel. Now, it doesn't give you very much out of the box, but you can go find what you need, and the support's great. Lots of people build on it. You get things like Ubuntu that are a more complete experience out of the box, but this lets you bring what you want to. If you don't want the whole shopping cart with you, you don't need it. When I worked with Angular brought everything with it. Sometimes it's nice, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you don't need the whole thing. And Express kind of takes that. We're going to give you just the basics. And when I say the basics, it's pretty much a router and a body parser and a web server, and that's about it. That means it's fast, it's light, and you're only adding to it what you absolutely need and want. And I've fallen in love with framework CLIs. Angular had a great one. I like views a lot, and one of the first things I looked for when I was playing with Express was a CLI, a generator. How can I just make a project real quick and go? Or do I need to know what it looks like? And they have a wonderful generator. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, where'd you go? Come on. There we go. Make a project. And don't peek. Don't peek. Okay. I forgot the command. Okay, well, I've got it installed. But the -G flag on there just means install it globally. Just install the npm install Express generator, and then once you have it installed, you can just simply, we'll put it on the desktop, Express no view, and then the app name. We're going to call it X-Men. Okay. What the no view does is you can generate, you can, if you don't specify a view, it's going to bring it. You guys can't even see my screen, huh? Oh. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So express -- no view X-Men. If you don't specify a view, it's going to actually express. We'll just do test. It gives me a view of Jade, and that's just basically a template renderer. Because I'm making something RESTful, I'm going to make my client out of something else. I am not going to want a view, so we'll just stick with my no view. Okay. So here we go. This is the app it generates. It gives you scaffolding for a basic directory structure. You do not have to use a structure if you don't want to. That's just the one it makes. You can customize this how you want. This makes sense to me, having done what I've done in Java and Spring, so I don't have any real complaints. When you start it up, it's going to come and run this www folder, or file. If you need to put any static assets for a website or anything, you put them in the appropriate folder. There's your index.html, and it gives you your basic routes, and this to kick it off. My first thought when I saw this was it was gross because it was still using var. And I actually did a little bit of searching today to see why it generates var, and it's because Express still supports, I think, Node v.1, which doesn't support ES6 yet. So I went through on my app and changed them all to const. I'm not going to do that tonight because you guys have got better things to do than watch me type. But let's see, I am needing to pull out some notes. So, okay, 1 second, I forgot about this part. Okay. Okay. So, break this down a little bit more. Can everyone read this? I went into the back and made sure I could read it, but some people have older eyes than I do. Okay. Right here, we're making a new Express instance here. And then we're registering what's called middleware in every layer. When I first ran into middleware, it took me about a day to wrap my head around what the concept was. Who can explain middleware in an easy way?
Middleware is a function that takes a request, a response, and the next function, and does something in between your request and your response.
Perfect. Something that goes in the middle. I wanted to think it was more of a kind of like a third-party extension, and then no, it's if you've ever worked with Java servlets, it's a filter. Something that gets called on every request. You have control over where it gets called. You can alter the response or the request itself, or you can just kill the request altogether. And it lives and dies on callbacks. Callback hell. But if you're going to handle authentication, it would be handled in the middleware. If you needed to parse a body out, it would be handled in the middleware. It lets you write small reusable functions and plug and play where you need to. So, and middleware is what makes this whole thing work. That's the cheating one. There we go. Okay, so out of the box, and I'm going to show you how minimalistic it is. npm install. This is kind of gutsy to do on a public network like this, isn't it? Anyway, it installs about 55 packages, which, if you've read any of the node module memes, it's nothing. People like to compare, biggest objects in the universe in node modules folders. Always the largest, it's bigger than black holes. So 50 packages really isn't much. And that gives you pretty much the framework, a debugger, a logger, and a cookie parser. I'm not doing anything cookies, so I could probably take that if I wanted to, but
My name's Steven. I'm on Smart.
So all of these right here are middleware. It's going to execute one function, then jump to the next, and next, and then the next, in the order that I register them. These right here are routes. And a route is nothing more than just simply, hey, if my request starts with /users, we're going to go to the user functions. If we're going to put one in here for the X-Men, actually we'll do that right now. We'll just const X-Men route, a router equals require, and the file doesn't exist yet. Routes, and then X-Men. Okay. And then simply register it down here. app.use /X-Men, and then X-Men router. Pretty straightforward. If I try to start up right now, it won't even start because I'm still downloading packages. But let's go create this X-Men route. Does everyone follow me so far, or do I got any questions while I get this set up? Okay. We're going to simply tell it to use Express. Equals require Express. And okay, and then we can just simply set up our first and then it takes the request object, response object, and the next function. Did I mess up on this? Okay. Oh, right there. Okay. Java programmer. I don't do brackets and parentheses very often, so that gets me every time. Okay. So what this is going to do is anything with an xmen slash is going to come into this function. You know what? I came a little bit prepared. We're going to go to the one that has everything in it. We can just start it up. So I cheated. I've written out the whole thing in here. So as you can see, what we're going to do is we're going to, anything with a slash, we're going to come in here, and I've got it set up as well to do, if I pass in a name as part of my URL query string, we're just going to simply filter out the list. I have this little service right here. Notice I have almost no logic here. As a Java programmer, I love abstraction. So I abstracted this out to a service, and it's going to go and either call this function where we get all of my xmen, or we're going to filter them by name. And this is going to pay off a little bit later when we do the Koa hello world. Because it was abstracted out, my core logic stays the same. I just changed how I set up my routing and my pathing. So kick it off with npm run start. Come in here to Postman and go get my xmen. And there you go. If I want to filter that out, and this guy really wants me on this network. Name equals storm. Send it. And it filters it out. Okay. We've come on down into, I've hit a few more highlights here. I can pass in an ID as part of the path, and this was only going to return the one xmen. If I want to make a new one, I simply do a post. And I wanted to show off something here with the middleware. Actually, let me show it. So what I'm going to do is any post that comes in, I want to go ahead and log the request body, because who cares about security? No, we'll just log it. And then we can do what's called content negotiation in here. Depending on the header I set in my request, do I want a JSON response or do I want a text response? It's going to format the request appropriately for me. So we can do post request. Let's get that body. Actually, no, let's do our headers first. Content type. Speaking of levels of REST, there are some people that will tell you that if you're doing everything application JSON, you're doing REST. I would strongly disagree, but the definition is that loose. Except, and in this case, we want application JSON. Okay. And then for my request body, raw. And I made it simple. It just wants a name. I don't have a Wolverine yet. Send it. And there's my request back, or my response back. I need 2 Wolverine, he's good. Now, let's go change this header to text plain. Send that. There's more than 1 Wolverine, so there's no harm in doing this again. And you can see the response comes back in a different format. And if we go look at my logs, we can see that my logging for function right here was logging each and every one of my requests for me. the key right here is whatever you put in the send is going to be the body of the response back, and then your appropriate status code. Usually, if you don't specify it, you can return a 200. In this case, I wanted a couple 404s, and on the delete, to return a 204, meaning the request was good, but there's no body. We deleted them. Are there any questions on this before I say we're done with Express and move on to Koa? Yes? What's that? That's this guy right here, and it was only doing it on the post for me. Oh, this right here? That would be... Yep, that would be Morgan. Morgan gets set up right...
It's on the app.js.
Is it actually on the app.js?
Yeah, it's the logger.
Yep, okay, yeah. Morgan. And it came with the generator. I didn't set that up. Any other questions? Okay. Who here has worked with Koa? Yeah, it's about the adoption rate too, from what I've seen. I earlier said that if Express was Debian, Koa would, if I told you it was Arch Linux, that'd probably be too nice. It's a kernel, and that's about it. It has no middleware that comes with it out of the box, but you can go find it. Express is already minimalist, and this is the extreme minimal. It was created by the same person who created Express, and this was his intention for the next evolution of it, but because it was so different, they changed the name. And I think Express now belongs to the Node.js Foundation, and Koa is being developed by this other guy. So they're not even developed by the same team anymore. You can see a lot of the same ideas, but the ideas are completely different. Whereas Express wants to augment Node. I'm sorry. Koa seeks to kind of replace it and make a better Node.
Why do you say that?
They wrap everything. This is more what they're saying. And I'm sure someone much more intelligent could say that, but the idea was they're going to wrap everything in their own context object, and it relies more on async and await than callback hell. You're still doing callbacks, we're just calling them a different name. And actually,
I mean, there are some significant differences.
Right.
In that under the covers it's using generators and promises and so forth. Okay.
No. It's and that I think that's probably where the difference is it's not the traditional node service with nested callbacks and everything. And everything I saw, you had the next function, but it was being called on an async await type thing. And I think that's what they're more pushing is that. And I didn't run into a generator function until last week, and I actually had to ask something because I work with, what the heck is this? But because it's so different, the adoption rate isn't near what it has been for Express. Everyone has learned Express is the way to go. They put out books for it. Everyone's on this train. And then someone comes by and radicalizes and changes everything. Not a big wonder in a business world why no one is jumping on. I don't want to say nobody. We've got a few applications where I work that use Koa. I think it's going to grow, but I think Express is much more likely to adopt some of its ideas than people jumping over onto Koa. But I've been wrong before. It has got a lot of fun. Do I have the Koa one open? Oh, come on. Okay, 1 second. Oh, okay. Okay. So Koa, as I said, is literally nothing more than the application server. Oh, you guys didn't even see. This thing keeps tripping me. If I ever do this, just please call me knucklehead and tell me that you guys can't see. Okay. Okay. It's literally the application server. I had to go out and get a body parser to read the JSON body on my post requests. I had to go out and get a router. Some people think that's cool. You're getting absolutely nothing more than you need. You can bring your own or you can make your own. Some people like everything just out of the box to be there. Again, maybe that's why Express is still having a higher success rate. There's less overhead and less let's get up and going time. But the idea is still, I think, something that is really cool and can drive the discussion. As you can see, I have an identical service, yay abstraction. I literally just Control-C, Control-V into here. And I fought with the router on this one more. There's a few other routers, and it looks like I picked the bad one. I picked the one that they made, and not the one that they told you I should use instead. But I picked it, and darn it, I was going to be stubborn and stick with it. So I think what I want to call attention to right here is this async here. And to use these, you need to be running at least Node 7. If you're running Node 7, shame on you, that's out of support. If you're running Node 6, you got 6 months to upgrade. So just move to Node 8 and you don't have to worry about Babel or anything on this. Or if you're upgrading, you might as well just upgrade to 10 because that's what's out now. But they have this async and await, and then the next function. And when I saw this to me was still kind of crazy. So the order it's going to execute this in is I've got these console statements in here. It's going to execute this line first. Then when it gets to this next, it's going to jump to the next function in my middleware that I've registered, which in this case is here, console log 2. It's going to execute this function. Then it's going to come back up here and start where this 3 is and finish that execution out. And as you can see, there's no callback. You can maybe argue if next is a callback or not, but it's really the next function. It's not a callback. Under the covers, it's still a callback because I'm still jumping right back into this method and doing it, but it's cleaner. It's easier to figure out what's going on. I'm not 10 functions deep. I can see more explicitly what's going on.
A critical component of that is that with Express, you can't come back out and affect the context afterwards. Once you say next, your middleware function is done with it and it moves on to the next point in the queue, and
Yes.
you never see it anymore. And in this case, you can await next, and when it's done, it's resolved, you can do more, which you're about to demonstrate now that I'm looking at more closely your code.
Oh, thank you. No, you stated it far more eloquently than I could on why this is useful. I even had to I had to ask Kevin back there why my generators were even a thing. They're not in Java, so. But the more I thought about it, they still kind of are because I'm going to call a method. I'm going to come right back into where I left off. So this to me feels much more comfortable. And again, Java programmer, so I love blocking code. Okay. So if we come in and start this up, probably got to go kill the other guy. That's why your applications don't run on the same port. Okay. You start this guy up, and he tells you already that something's deprecated. I love that. I did an npm install, pull all the latest versions down, and something's deprecated. I can't fix it. I just got to learn to live with it. Maybe I make it go away later. Well, I hope that whoever deprecated this fixes it before they update it and remove it, but I'm not going to lose any sleep either. So we come in here. Where's Postman? And we're going to go get Xmen number 1. Come back in here. We can see the logging actually went as expected, 1, 2, 3. It executes this statement up here, jumps into this next one on the next, and then it's going to finish out the execution here. So what I was able to do is I was able to time how long the response took. And it took 2 milliseconds. And if I go look at Postman says it took 19. Well, that's probably just how long it took for the packet to leave this server and come back into me and Postman to recognize it. So you can do useful things in there. If you needed to, again, do authentication in here, you would just simply chain it on the next.
So I'm curious how this works. I'm not familiar with Koa, but you're saying that the next function being passed in here is a function generator with all of the middleware that you've added. Is that correct?
Yes. It's going to call the next function I have registered in this chain. So it's kind of the opposite of a callback, I guess.
You could theoretically just keep on calling next or call it through strategic points in your route to modify the context.
Yes.
On the middleware. So you have to kind of understand the order of the middleware added.
That is a very dangerous double-edged sword. Order matters very much. In fact, when I was putting this together, I couldn't get the body parser to work. And I finally found a new one. But everything I saw had the body parser in a different place. Some had them at the end, which to me didn't make any sense. And others had it right here where I have it, which made more sense. But this body parser is a middleware that I'm explicitly calling, and it's somewhere in that chain is going to get in there, make that JSON body for me before I even get to it in my post request. So it's altering the request body, and then I can alter the response body in there as well. This lets me write smaller, more concise methods and reusable, but order very much matters for that. And if anyone spent any time functional programming, side effects suck. And this is all about side effects. Did you have something else?
Does the next function return the results of the middleware or something?
I don't think, nope, because as I said, I'm passing in, it will return results in as much as it's affecting the context object. But other than that, this function has no idea knowing what the result was in it.
Yeah, you basically, like, Koa calls you install your middleware, you decorate the context with what you want, and it gets it back and says, oh, here's a body.
Yeah.
It's almost like it tells you, like, you're the middleware of Koa, really.
So another way that's a little bit obvious is that async function that starts on line 15 and ends at line 22 doesn't have a return, and therefore its promise is just going to resolve to an undefined value. And so what that's telling you is we've written a function that doesn't return anything. Because it's an async function, it returns a promise, but the promise doesn't, it unwraps to empty. So you have to have something else going on there, and that something else would be the context, which it's possible that context gets recreated with every function. Like it could be that there's a new one everywhere and it gets copied through. It's unlikely that that's actually what's going on, because it wouldn't be efficient to do all that copying.
So, if I understand this correctly, like if your route doesn't return anything, then the result from the context is what's returned. Mm-hmm. Like what the context has in it, like its body, like in line 8 to 13. It's setting the body, that's what's returned to you in the response.
It's literally the context is the thing that you're interacting with. A return doesn't get applied to anything, and so a return is useless.
Setting the context body back to something else and sending that along the way. There's some middleware in here that's going to capture that and turn it into something more meaningful, but I'm done with it at that point. Sounds like I should have probably started with the COA. That sounded like it was more fun than the Express part. Are there?
You were able to, I like the fact that you started with Express and you were able to demonstrate the setting up a REST API in Express, so that you said, okay, here's REST, here's the API in Express, most of you are familiar with Express, now here's COA, here's how to do something similar.
I am just about out of time. Are there any last questions, regrets, complaints, gripes? CHG is hiring. We are on the Fortune 100 for best places to work, and USA, no, some computer world. Yeah, number 11 tech places to work as well. So great. I love it. We're hiring. If you have good feedback, come talk to me. If you got bad feedback, don't.
Darrel doesn't want to grow.
All right. Well, thank you.